Camera flashes fired non-stop outside the Pentagon's river entrance. Senators, generals, and defense industry executives filed through the security barriers. Television trucks lined the sidewalk. My family arrived looking like people who believed the night belonged to them. My father wore a custom-tailored tuxedo. My mother wore a strand of pearls. Ryan adjusted his cufflinks for the cameras. Vanessa stepped out of the car, letting the train of her gown sweep across the granite. They believed Cole Aeronautics would be announced that night as the winner of the $680 million Aegis Hawk contract. My father saw me walking toward the security desk. He stepped directly into my path. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for work." He held up his invitation and tilted it so the lights caught the Department of Defense seal. "Your name isn't on the list. This is no place for someone who fixes computers." Ryan did not even bother to look at me. "Call a car and go home. Don't stand here." Vanessa looked my plain black dress up and down. "You actually wore that to the Pentagon? People will think you came to hand out programs." My mother lowered her voice, using the tone she always used when she wanted to sound compassionate. "Megan, if you go in there, you'll embarrass the whole family. You understand?" I did not explain. I did not argue. I walked around them to the second security desk, the one with no line. I set a black card on the counter. No logo, no gold border. The scanner gave a sharp beep. The screen changed color and switched to a high-level verification mode. The security officer read what appeared, then sprang to his feet and squared his shoulders. "Please wait one moment." The secure corridor door opened. General Marcus Hale came toward us, the 4 stars on his shoulders catching the light. He extended his hand. "Director Cole, the secretary is waiting for you in the conference room." He turned to the officer. "The director's place at the head table is ready." The blood drained from my father's face. Ryan stood frozen, his hand still on his cufflink. Vanessa stared at the black card on the counter. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For 11 years, my family had believed I was a Department of Defense contract technician with no money, no connections, and no ambition. They had never once asked what I actually did. Tonight, they were about to find out. Before the night ended, the contract they had come to celebrate would disappear. But to understand why my father turned white when he heard the word director, we have to go back exactly 1 week to a dinner in Georgetown, where he placed a folder and a pen in front of me. Exactly 1 week earlier, I parked at the curb 2 blocks from my father's house. Every parking space out front was taken. Ryan's Bentley sat close to the front steps. The catering company's van blocked the rest. No one had saved a place for me, and no one had thought to. The Georgetown house was a 3-story red brick townhouse. My father bought it when I was 12, just after his first military contract. He loved telling guests that story. I rang the bell. A server opened the door. The champagne had already been opened in the dining room. 4 Dom Perignon glasses stood on the walnut table, 3 of them already half empty. No one had waited for me. No one stood up. My mother looked up, saw me, and returned to the conversation she had been having. "Oh, you're here," she said in the tone of someone who had just remembered a minor errand. "Have them bring another place setting." I sat in the chair at the far end of the table. There was no glass at my place. Ryan stood before the appetizer was served. He held his champagne glass and turned his wrist slightly so everyone could see his new watch. $680 million, Ryan said. "Aegis Hawk is going to Cole Aeronautics." Vanessa clapped. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. 3 years, Ryan continued. 3 years preparing the bid, 3 years going back and forth between Arlington and Crystal City. Now there is only one final administrative step, one signature, done. I kept my expression calm. The final administrative step he had just mentioned was the system security assessment. It was sitting on my desk in a building 15 minutes away. Unsigned, the final security authorization signature belonged to me. Without it, the contract could not be approved. My father set down his knife. "It wasn't just the bid package, Ryan," he said slowly, savoring every word. "Any company can submit paperwork. The difference is knowing who sits on the procurement board, who needs money for a re-election campaign, and who is looking for a position for his son." I spoke to the right people. "I started 18 months ago." "And they agreed?" Vanessa asked. They understand the situation, my father said. Vanessa turned to Ryan, her eyes bright. Then we can put down the deposit on the place in Colorado. I'm not waiting another season. She counted on her fingers. A private jet. You can't fly commercial once you're at this level. People judge you. The fall fundraiser. And I want you to accept the interview. That financial network has asked 3 times already. One thing at a time, Ryan said with a laugh. No. My mother shook her head, her voice full of pride. Vanessa is right. You've taken this family to another level. Before, we were contractors. After this week, we will be a name. I looked down at my plate. 3 days earlier, my technical team had completed its second source code review of Aegis Hawk. We found 4 code segments in the control module that did not appear in the design documentation. No explanation, no approval history. I had flagged them and required Cole Aeronautics to provide an explanation within 10 days. Everyone at the table remained completely unaware. No one asked how my week had been or whether I had eaten dinner. No one knew that the person responsible for Aegis Hawk's final security review was sitting right in front of them. To them, I was only a contractor who could not possibly understand what they were discussing. They mistook my silence for powerlessness. My father stood and raised his glass. The chandelier caught the crystal and cast small streaks of light across the tablecloth. Ryan rose with him. Vanessa lifted her glass in both hands. My mother looked at my father as though he had just won something. After this week, my father said, no one in Washington will ever look down on the Cole family again. 4 glasses met in the middle of the dining room. I did not raise mine. I looked at my father and said nothing. Because I was the only person in that room who knew that after that week, no one in Washington would say the Cole name without lowering their voice. The main course was served. The room had grown lively enough for them to start making me the evening's entertainment. Vanessa turned to me. Megan, how many computers did you fix today? Ryan laughed. Don't tease Megan. He set down his glass. Maybe she'll get promoted this year. Password manager. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? My mother smiled and did nothing to stop them. I work in systems architecture and security, I said. My father waved a hand. That is a long way of describing an ordinary job, Megan. My company has contracted with the Department of Defense for 30 years. I know how many people in that building carry impressive-sounding titles and make no decisions at all. You sit in a windowless room, run software someone else wrote, and fill out forms someone else designed. He cut a piece of meat. I don't blame you. I'm only disappointed. How much do they pay you? Vanessa asked. I knew the question was coming. It always came halfway through the main course, after the wine had taken effect, and before dessert arrived. 94,000, I said. My real compensation was higher, but my position and benefits were restricted information. 94,000 was just believable enough for them to pity me. Vanessa turned to Ryan. You spent exactly that much on our trip to Italy last summer, in 10 days. 11 days, Ryan said. Everyone at the table laughed. My mother set down her fork, sighed, and shifted into the special tone she used when she wanted to hurt me while still sounding gentle. Do you know what disappoints me most, Megan? In high school, you were the smartest one in the family, smarter than Ryan. Your teachers called me constantly to praise you. I thought you were going to do something important. She looked at me. Then you chose this job. You have no ambition, sweetheart. That isn't anyone's fault. Some people simply aren't born with it. You should have joined the company. My father did not look up. I offered twice. You could have worked as Ryan's assistant, trained for 3 years, and then I would have moved you into contracts. By now, you would have your own office on the 11th floor. You would be sitting at this table in a different capacity. In a different capacity, Ryan repeated with a nod. Exactly. I set down my water glass. I had stayed silent through the jokes about my job and my salary. But when my father spoke about my standing, I could not remain silent. I would rather protect this country's systems than sell them to the highest bidder. The table went silent. Vanessa looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at my father. My mother tightened her grip on the stem of her glass. Ryan put one hand on the table. What did you just say? You heard me. Don't talk as if you understand this industry. The humor vanished from his voice. You sit in a server room and think you know how defense contracting works? I brought this project to the finish line. I negotiated with people you have never even been allowed to meet. Without people like me, the systems you guard would not exist. That's enough, my father said. He looked at me longer than usual. You are jealous of your brother. You have been jealous of him since you were 15, and you still have not outgrown it. I am telling you this because I am your father. You are not morally superior to anyone, Megan. You simply lost. And losers always look for a prettier name for their failure. My mother nodded. I did not answer. Every fact that could prove them wrong was classified or otherwise restricted. I could not use the truth to defend myself without breaking the law. That was the price of the job. Ryan pushed back his chair and bent to pick up his briefcase. He placed a thick folder on the table. It had a dark blue hardcover with the Cole Aeronautics seal embossed in the upper right corner. Then, you should understand how important this is. I did not reach for the folder. Ryan opened it himself. He turned it toward me and slowly flipped through the first few pages with his thumb, like a man displaying something the person across from him could never possess. 3 years, he said. Look carefully. This is 3 years. System diagrams, milestone schedules, subcontractor lists, a 20-year life cycle cost chart. Aegis Hawk was a command and communication system for military unmanned aircraft. It transmitted flight commands, designated targets, shared battlefield data among units, and maintained communications with bases when conventional infrastructure was destroyed. Every piece of software and equipment integrated into the system had to undergo security review. I had read the entire file, the complete version, not the condensed copy Ryan was flipping through. I had read it 3 weeks earlier in a room with no cellular signal. The ceremony at the Pentagon next week, my father said. The program will be officially announced there. We will be seated in the corporate leadership section. How many people have already agreed? Vanessa asked. Ryan did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the kitchen door and waited until the server was gone. Enough, he said. 2 people on the evaluation board, 1 in budget, a senior aide in the procurement office. He matters most because he controls the order in which the file moves forward. They have all been persuaded. Persuaded. I remembered his choice of word. How much do we actually get? Vanessa continued. I'm serious. 680 million. But how much comes to us? Ryan held up 3 fingers. First, the initial disbursement will cover every cost we have already incurred and still leave a surplus. He folded down 1 finger. Second, the company's value will rise sharply as soon as the contract is announced. His 3rd finger lowered to the folder. And this is the important part. Aegis Hawk is not just one contract. Once the system enters the network, Cole Aeronautics will have an almost insurmountable advantage in every later maintenance, upgrade, integration, and training package. The revenue stream could last for decades. Vanessa placed a hand on his wrist. My mother looked at Ryan as though he had restored the family name. Ryan turned another page, and I saw it. The page was upside down from where I sat, but the heading was still clear. Appendix C, Technical Consulting and Integration Support Services, Helix Meridian, Singapore. I did not stare. I lowered my eyes to my plate, cut another piece of meat, and held the name in my mind. 4 months earlier, Helix Meridian had appeared in an internal counterintelligence bulletin. It was a consulting company registered in Singapore, with very little public activity and no identifiable product. Its name had surfaced in several transactions, involving command technology subject to export restrictions. The bulletin reached no conclusion. It only placed Helix Meridian on a watch list. Now the company appeared in an Aegis Hawk appendix under Technical Consulting Services. Ryan had just placed that very document in front of me to prove I knew nothing about his industry. Given Helix Meridian's history, its presence in the file for a military system was a serious warning. I kept my breathing steady. Ryan closed the folder, tied it, and set it beside his plate, as though it were an asset. There, he said. That is what you call selling to the highest bidder. My father pushed his chair back slightly. He adjusted the button of his jacket. When he spoke, his tone had changed. It was no longer the voice of a man boasting. It was the voice of a man about to ask for something. But before the award ceremony, he said, We need to resolve one small family matter. My father gave a signal. The server left the room and closed the door behind him. There is someone waiting in the study, he said. A notary. He has been here since 7 o'clock, before I had even arrived. He stood, went to the wooden cabinet against the wall, opened the bottom drawer, and removed a folder clipped inside a green cover. He did not hand it to me. He placed it on the table beside my water glass and nudged it forward with 2 fingers. Beside the folder, he set down a fountain pen. I opened the first page. Mortgage and Asset Management Authorization Agreement. Property. Cedar Ridge Farm, Howard County, Maryland. 121.4 acres. Owner. Megan A. Cole. 3 important provisions had been separated across different pages. The first, I agreed to pledge Cedar Ridge as collateral for a loan. The second, temporary management authority over the property would transfer to a trust controlled by my father. The third appeared at the bottom of page 14. I consented to enforcement against the property and waived certain rights to object if the loan went into default. I read the provision again. Cedar Ridge was a horse farm. The main house had been built in 1911, with a slate roof and white fencing that followed the eastern hillside. My grandfather had lived there for the last 37 years of his life. He left the farm to me alone in a will drafted by a separate attorney. He left no portion of it to my father. I knew why. When I was 22, my grandfather told me that my father looked at every asset and saw only collateral value. If Cedar Ridge ever fell into his hands, the farm would soon be sold or divided into a housing development. He said, "What I leave you should serve your life, not your father's ambition." I closed the folder and looked up. "This is a small sacrifice," my father said. "I want you to understand that before you react. 6 months, nothing more. You will lose nothing. You do not live there, and you only visit a few times a year." "Your grandfather would agree," my mother said immediately. "I know what you're thinking." But he was a practical man. He would not let a piece of land sit idle when Ryan needed it to build his future. He loved you, but he loved Ryan too. She had met my grandfather only a few times a year, mostly on holidays. Ryan pushed his plate aside and leaned forward. "Let me explain the financing. The company needs $45 million before the contract signing date. That is a requirement, not an option." He looked at me. "Cole Aeronautics is undergoing an independent audit. Every asset in the company's name is under review. I cannot use company property to secure a loan without leaving a trail." He pointed to the papers in front of me. "Cedar Ridge is debt-free, unencumbered, and legally separate from Cole Aeronautics. It is inherited property owned by someone who does not work for the company. Of all the family assets we can reach, it is the only one that fits." He leaned back, satisfied. "Cedar Ridge is worth about $22 million, I said. Ryan nodded. "So how does it secure a $45 million loan?" He paused. "The entire loan is not based on the farm," Ryan said more slowly. "Cedar Ridge is the initial collateral. The remainder is based on the disbursement expected after the contract is signed." "But the contract has not been signed." "It will be." "Then why borrow first?" I asked. "If the contract is as certain as you say, wait for the disbursement. Then there is no loan, no mortgage, and no need for my signature." My father set down his glass. "Certain matters have to be completed first," he said. "What matters?" "Megan." "Dad, I'm asking seriously. What is that money being transferred for before the contract is signed?" Vanessa gave a quiet laugh, as though the conversation were wasting her time. "Strategic consulting fees," Ryan said. "Consulting for whom?" "There is a technical partner in Singapore. Helix Meridian." Ryan's head snapped up. For a moment, no one spoke. He was trying to understand why I had remembered the name. "You saw it in the file," he said. "Yes. What services do they provide?" "Systems integration." "Which part of the system?" "You don't need to know that." "Does the file contain a services agreement with them? A statement of work, delivery milestones, and acceptance criteria?" Ryan did not answer. "If Aegis Hawk is not approved, who repays the loan?" "It will be approved." "If it is not approved, who repays it?" "Megan." "And if the loan defaults, who owns Cedar Ridge?" Ryan slammed his palm onto the table. The glass in front of my mother trembled. "That's enough. He stood, took 2 steps, and turned back. You want it spelled out? Fine. The money is not a consulting fee. It is an acceleration fee. That is what people in this industry call it. Other companies pay the same kind of money. The only difference is that they do not have to explain it to their little sister over dinner. Ryan, my father said. But he did not stop him. No, Dad, she wants to know, so I'll tell her. He braced both hands on the table. 12 million for the intermediary, 8 million for political consultants, 15 million for Helix Meridian. The remaining 10 million is for people who can influence the approval process. He looked directly at me. That is the entire amount. My father dabbed the corner of his mouth with his napkin, slowly, as though he had just heard his son read an ordinary expense report. Certain people need assurance that their interests will be met, he said. There is nothing wrong with that, Megan. That is how things work in this city, including inside the building where you work. I looked down at the folder. $45 million would be transferred before a defense contract was signed. Cedar Ridge would serve as the initial collateral. My name would appear in the loan file. If the deal failed, I would lose the farm. If the deal succeeded, my name would still be tied to the money. Everyone at the table was looking at me. I reached out and picked up the fountain pen. My mother exhaled. Vanessa took Ryan's hand. My father sat straighter, and for the first time all evening, he smiled at me. I held the pen, but I did not remove the cap. I turned back to page 14. The final provision was still there. If the loan went into default, I consented to enforcement against Cedar Ridge and waived certain rights to object. I read the sentence again, slowly, making certain I would remember every word later. Then I placed the pen on the table. The metal touched the wood with a very soft sound, but everyone in the room heard it. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward my father. I will not use grandfather's property to finance a bribe. The smile on my father's face faltered, twisted, and disappeared. Ryan shot to his feet. His chair toppled backward and struck the wine cabinet. What did you just say? You heard me. It is not a bribe. He slammed both hands onto the table. The silverware rattled. It is a business expense. Every company in this industry has costs like these. You sit in a server room earning $94,000 a year and lecture me about ethics? I am not lecturing you. I am refusing to sign. You have no idea what you are doing. I understand exactly what I am doing. Ryan laughed. It was not the laugh of someone who found anything amusing. Fine. Then let me tell you what happens next. He came around the head of the table and stopped an arm's length from me. First, the will. I can challenge testamentary capacity, undue influence, and execution formalities. I do not have to win immediately. I only have to file and seek a temporary order preventing any transfer of Cedar Ridge. His finger pointed at my face. If the court grants it, you will not be able to sell, mortgage, or transfer the farm. It will remain tied up in litigation until the case is over. How long? I asked. Long enough. He nodded. This is what I do. I know how to drag out procedure. Dad and I have enough money to litigate for years. What about you, Megan? Ryan, my mother said softly. She did not stand. And there is a second thing. He lowered his voice until it was almost intimate. Your job. You handle classified records and have to maintain a security clearance. One complaint that you concealed a conflict of interest involving a defense contractor, and your access could be restricted while it is reviewed. He straightened. You could be removed from the project before you ever had the chance to prove you did nothing wrong. My mother began to cry, right on schedule. She turned toward my father, not me. Do you understand what you are destroying? She said. Your brother has devoted years to this project. The entire family has everything riding on next week, and you sit there, push the papers back at your father, and think you have done something noble. She wiped her eyes with her napkin. You are jealous of Ryan. I am saying it plainly. You have been jealous of your brother since you were 15, and today you finally found a way to retaliate. I am not jealous of Ryan. Your grandfather would be so disappointed if he knew how selfish you were being. I looked at her. That was the only sentence all evening that hurt. Not because it was true, because she knew it was not, and said it anyway. Vanessa folded her arms. You have always been the weakest link in this family, she said. I told Ryan that the first year I came into this family. You bring nothing. No money, no connections, not even a name worth introducing at a party. Fine. Some people are like that, but if you cannot contribute, the least you can do is stay out of everyone else's way. My father remained seated. He did not stand, pound the table, raise his voice, or point a finger. He waited until the other three had finished, then folded his napkin, placed it to the left of his plate, and looked at me. You think you are refusing me, he said. I am refusing to sign a document. No. He slowly shook his head. You are standing in the way of a $680 million defense contract. Those are two different things, and I'm afraid you still do not understand the distinction. His voice was perfectly even. That, not Ryan shouting, sent a chill down my back. In 30 years in this business, I have seen a few people do what you are doing. Not many. One lost his professional license. One spent 4 years under a tax investigation and never learned who reported him. One got out of his car in a parking lot after work and still walks with a cane. He paused. I am not threatening you. I am only telling you what happens to people who stand in the way of a contract like this. No one in the room spoke. Ryan looked at my father. Even he was silent. You still have time, my father said. I am your father. The door is still open. I sat motionless. For years I had held on to one small hope, that someday they would learn what I really did and see me differently. That hope died at that table. Not when they mocked my job. Not when they demanded Cedar Ridge. It died when my father described a man who now walked with a cane in the same voice he used to quote a price. I placed both hands in my lap. My left index finger touched the edge of the watch on my right wrist. The watch on my wrist looked like a fitness tracker. Titanium case, flat glass face, black rubber strap. I pressed the right edge twice. The screen did not light up. There was no sound. A faint vibration confirmed that the device had begun recording and was automatically saving a copy to a secure repository under my control. Every second carried a timestamp and authentication code. Any alteration would leave a trace. Under the legal guidance I had previously received, I was permitted to record a conversation in which I was a participant. I looked up at my father. You said I still have time, so I want to be clear. What is the deadline? Ryan answered for him. Because Ryan always answered for him. You have to decide before midnight. The notary will complete the documents tonight. The transfer order has to enter the system before 9 tomorrow morning. $45 million? Yes. Transferred where? Ryan lifted his chin. To an account in Singapore. The funds are distributed from there. I need you to confirm it again before I decide. I kept my voice calm. $12 million to the intermediary. $8 million to political consultants, $15 million to Helix Meridian, and $10 million to people involved in the approval process. He watched me for several seconds. Then he shrugged. Yes. The people involved in the approval process are federal officials? They are people with the authority to influence the decision. What happens if the money does not arrive before 9 in the morning? Helix walks, Ryan answered without hesitation. They said so directly. They have another contractor waiting. If we do not transfer on time, they will give the integration package Cole Aeronautics depends on to that company. He leaned toward me. And next week, Dad will not be the one walking onto the stage at the Pentagon? Where does the loan repayment come from? My father answered this one. He answered comfortably. From the first disbursement. 30 days after the contract is signed, the federal funds arrive, the company repays the loan, and the lien on the farm is released. You will have the papers back before Christmas. You just said the company will use proceeds from the defense contract to repay a loan that financed those payments. I said the company will use contract revenue to repay short-term financing. He adjusted his cuff. You use your term. I use mine. Both describe the same cash flow. Vanessa set down her glass. Do you understand who you are taking on? She asked. A friend of mine has a father who is a federal judge in this district. Ryan plays golf with the chiefs of staff for 2 senators. Your father has spent 20 years building relationships in Washington. She looked directly at me. What evidence do you have? Who do you think you can rely on? Vanessa, my mother said. No, I want Megan to understand. Vanessa turned back to me. This family has relationships near every office with the power to decide. Where do you think you can take a story like this? Ryan gave a dry laugh. Don't threaten Megan. She cannot do anything. He looked me up and down. The next sentence was not a threat. He said it because he genuinely believed it. You do not have the money to fight this family. You do not have a lawyer. You do not have a name powerful enough to call at 10 o'clock at night. Tomorrow, you can tell this story to anyone you want. They will ask where you work, hear your answer, and politely show you the door. He paused. No one will believe you, Megan. I let the sentence hang in the room. The recording had now been running for more than half an hour. It contained the transfer deadline, the receiving account, the intended allocation, and confirmation that the loan would be repaid with federal contract proceeds. Vanessa had even listed the connections the family believed would protect them. No one had been coerced. They had voluntarily confirmed every detail. They believed I had nowhere to turn, so they kept talking. They did not know my silence was keeping the recorder running. In more than half an hour, they had created the core of the case against themselves. My father pulled back his sleeve and checked his watch. The white-faced Patek Philippe on his wrist was the gift he had bought himself after the 2011 contract. The watch on my wrist continued silently recording his voice. 9:20, he said. He lowered his sleeve. You have until midnight to choose your family. My father stood and walked to the wooden cabinet. This time, he did not take out the folder. He removed a slim leather briefcase, brought it back to the table, unlocked it, and pulled out 4 envelopes. He placed them on the table side by side in a straight line. The paper was thick and cream-colored. The Department of Defense seal was printed in the upper left corner. A control number and a narrow barcode strip appeared in the lower right. I immediately recognized the type of envelope and the control number printed on it. They were invitations to the Aegis Hawk announcement ceremony at the Pentagon. Each invitation was assigned to a guest who had passed a security screening. My office oversaw that process. I had disclosed my family relationship to Cole Aeronautics in advance, so I had not personally reviewed their files, but I had seen the names of 4 members of the Cole family on the final list. Next Thursday, my father said. 7 p.m. Corporate Leadership Section. First 3 rows. Directly behind the generals. Vanessa reached out and touched one of the envelopes. Will there be reporters? Yes. My father sat down. Television, trade press, and the wire services. He straightened the 4 invitations again. Originally, I requested 1 additional guest seat. He said that to me. I made 2 phone calls for it, and I do not like calling anyone to ask for favors. I intended to bring you. You are still my daughter. He looked at me. I thought that if you saw how truly successful people are received and where they stand in a room like that, you might understand what you have missed. He placed 1 finger on the empty space beside the 4 envelopes. Sign the papers. The 5th invitation is yours. I looked at his finger resting on the tabletop. At 7 o'clock next Thursday, I would be inside that building, not in the 3rd row of the corporate section. My name was already on the program as the official presenting Aegis Hawk's final security determination. My seat at the head table had been confirmed 2 weeks earlier. I'm not signing, I said. My father withdrew his hand. He did not ask again. He sat straighter, and his voice shifted into the cold tone he used to end negotiations. Then from this moment forward, you are no longer a member of this family. My mother said nothing. I will call the attorneys in the morning. Your name will be removed from my will, every revocable trust, and the insurance beneficiary list. You will not return to this house. You will not appear at any family event. He paused. And from now on, do not expect the Cole name to open any doors for you. I have never needed it to. My father turned to Vanessa. Call your mother, tell Patricia she will come with us next Thursday. Send me her passport information in the morning so I can add her to the open guest slot. Vanessa smiled. That's wonderful. Mom will be thrilled. She knows how to speak to people like that, and she can sit at any table. She knows how to conduct herself, my father said, looking at me as he spoke. My mother finally said something. She looked me up and down, stopping at my flat leather shoes and then at the gray cloth coat hanging over the back of my chair. This is probably for the best, she said softly. Think about it, Megan. What would you wear to the Pentagon? Do you even own anything appropriate? There will be photographs all evening, How would the family look with you standing beside Ryan in those pictures? Ryan righted his fallen chair and sat down. The generals would assume you were technical support traveling with the group, he said. Someone would ask you to fix the microphone. Vanessa laughed. My mother laughed. My father did not laugh, because he did not need to when he believed he had already won. I stood. I pulled my coat from the back of the chair, put it on, and adjusted the collar. No one rose or said anything else. The four of them remained around the table among empty glasses, an unsigned folder, and 4 invitations arranged neatly on the wood. I looked at each of them one last time, exactly where they were sitting. You have all made your choice, I said. Then I walked out of the dining room. The hallway was paved in white marble. My footsteps echoed more loudly than I wanted. Behind me, the voices in the dining room returned to normal. Then came laughter. Then the pop of a cork. They opened the second bottle less than 2 minutes after I walked out. To reach the front foyer, I had to pass Ryan's study. The door was partly open. The desk lamp was still on. He had been in there before dinner. He always went in before dinner to check one last time whether anything had changed during the day, then stepped into the dining room wearing the expression of a man who had just confirmed that the world was still running according to his plans. A laptop sat open on the desk, angled toward the door. I stopped outside the threshold. I knew I could not enter or touch the computer. Either act could compromise the value of any evidence and alert Ryan that he was being watched. He would check the system logs. By noon the next day, every relevant file might be deleted or moved. So I did not step inside. From the hallway, I recorded only what was already visible on the screen facing me. I took my government phone from my coat pocket. It preserved original images with timestamps and authentication codes. 3 windows were arranged side by side on the screen. The first was a spreadsheet. The first row showed tomorrow's date. The figure beside it was 45 million. The second was an email inbox. The sender's name was clearly visible. Helix Meridian Technical Integration. The third was a PDF open to its cover page. Aegis Remote Recovery Protocol Reverend 4.2 Restricted Distribution. I captured 4 images, then put the phone away. Those images were no substitute for a search warrant. They were only preliminary leads, enough for the proper authorities to assess the risk and preserve the data before it disappeared. I looked again at the document title. I had read Aegis Hawk's entire design file, all 790 pages, through 3 separate review cycles. The name times Remote Recovery Protocol times did not appear in the technical specifications, architecture diagrams, or any document Cole Aeronautics had submitted to the government. But the document in front of me was already at revision 4.2. It was not a newly created draft. It had been developed through multiple undisclosed versions. I did not look at the laptop again. I crossed the foyer and opened the front door. No one came to see me out. The air outside was cold and dry. I walked the length of the gravel drive, reached the sidewalk, and continued to my car 2 blocks away. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. Then I opened the Procurement Counterintelligence Emergency Reporting channel. I submitted the audio file, which ran longer than half an hour, the 4 images I had just taken, and a preliminary report. The report identified 3 primary indicators: a planned $45 million foreign transfer scheduled for 9 the next morning, Helix Meridian as the recipient and a known subject of prior monitoring, and the existence of an Aegis Hawk technical document outside the official file. I stated clearly that I had observed the screen only from the hallway and had not entered the room, touched the laptop, or accessed any device. I also disclosed that Thomas Cole was my father, Ryan Cole was my brother, and Cole Aeronautics was my family's company. Those relationships had already been reported to the ethics office. My final line was a request: transfer all further review and verification to an independent team. I submitted the report at 9:58 p.m. Then I sat still in the car with both hands on the steering wheel, watching the yellow light from my father's dining room windows at the end of the block. The party inside continued. My phone vibrated at 10:14 p.m. The message came from the counterintelligence duty desk. Received. Helix Meridian matches an active monitoring file. Emergency review initiated. Do not communicate further through routine channels. The car no one had saved a space for outside my father's house was a dark gray sedan with no logo and civilian plates. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary government vehicle, but laminated glass, a reinforced frame, and a secure communication system had been installed after a risk assessment 3 years earlier. Vanessa had walked past it that evening. She parked her coupe a few yards away and never looked twice. I left Georgetown, crossed the bridge, and drove southwest. 40 minutes later, I turned into a residential complex in Northern Virginia. My family believed I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Alexandria. I had let them believe it for 8 years. Whenever my mother asked about rent, I gave her a number. The number was real. It was the monthly government housing charge deducted from my pay. The complex had no sign. Security officers staffed the entrance around the clock. I lowered the window. The officer on duty looked at me, checked his screen, and nodded. "Good evening, Director Cole." After fingerprint verification, the elevator automatically took me to the floor authorized for me. The apartment was not large. Most of it looked like any other government residence: a living room, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and walls with almost no decoration. The difference was at the end of the hallway. A steel door led to a workspace certified for handling restricted material. Inside were 3 monitors, a workstation on a dedicated secure line, sound masking systems inside the walls, and a double-locked file cabinet. I closed the door, sat down, and placed my hand on the reader. The screen came to life. Megan Cole, Director Defense, Acquisition Systems, Security, Authority. Final System Security Certification Signatory. I had held that position for 4 years. My office was responsible for the final security certification of technology systems entering defense networks. My team reviewed source code, component provenance, system architecture, and supply chains. I did not decide which company won a bid. I did not allocate funding or select contractors. I certified that a system was secure enough to connect to the defense network, or I refused to sign. Without my office's certification, a system could not operate on defense infrastructure, no matter who had been awarded the contract. I opened the Aegis Hawk folder. The final assessment report sat at the top of the list, 327 pages. Status: pending certification. The last page contained an empty signature box. My name was printed beneath it. That evening, Ryan had called the assessment an administrative formality. Vanessa had asked how many computers I fixed. Not one of them had ever asked where my name appeared in the process. I pushed back my chair and looked toward the shelf to the left of the monitor. A framed photograph from Cedar Ridge sat there. My grandfather stood beside the white fence, one hand resting on the neck of an old mare. I stood beside him at 22, my hair tied back. He once told me that a person's worth did not require anyone else to announce it before it became real. At the time, I thought he was only trying to comfort me. Now I understood that he had been teaching me not to confuse recognition with value. By the time I reached home, I no longer wanted my family to see me differently. It no longer mattered. If all they had done that night was humiliate me, I would have gone home, slept a few hours, and reported to work the next morning. No one opens a federal investigation because of a terrible family dinner. But humiliation was not all they had done. The next morning, $45 million was scheduled to be transferred to Helix Meridian, a company already present in a counterintelligence monitoring file. Ryan's computer also contained an undisclosed technical document, the Times Aegis Remote Recovery Protocol, already developed through revision 4.2. That was no longer a family matter. From the moment the emergency report was accepted, verification passed to an independent team. I was no longer the only person controlling the process, and that was exactly what I wanted. I would not use my office to punish my family for the things they had said at dinner, but I would not use our family relationship to shield them from what they had done. I acted because I had seen exactly the kind of thing I was paid to identify. I pulled my chair back to the desk and opened the second monitor. A secure notification appeared. Aegis Hawk Emergency Review Independent Team activated. Below it was the time of the first meeting, 6:30 a.m. I looked at the upper right corner of the screen and set a countdown. It began counting down to 7 p.m. the following Thursday, the moment the Aegis Hawk announcement ceremony would begin. At 4:12 a.m. a federal judge approved 3 emergency measures: a temporary hold on the transaction, preservation of electronic data, and searches of locations connected to Cole Aeronautics. I did not request those orders. I also had no authority to determine the scope of the investigation. I provided the recording and 4 images to the Defense Criminal Investigative Service (DCIS). The matter was immediately referred to the FBI and the federal prosecutor on overnight duty. A duty judge reviewed the request before dawn. The basis was clear. A $45 million international transfer was scheduled to occur in less than 5 hours. If authorities waited for ordinary business hours, the money could have left the U.S. banking system. At 4:20 a.m., the correspondent bank received a sealed transaction hold order. At 6:30 a.m., the first coordination meeting began. Investigative teams staged near 3 locations: Cole Aeronautics headquarters in Crystal City, an outsourced data center in Ashburn, and Ryan's executive office in an annex building in Arlington. At 9 a.m., Ryan submitted the transfer order. His screen read, "Processing." He did not know the transaction had already been held. As soon as the transfer instruction was recorded, all 3 teams simultaneously executed search and data preservation warrants. The investigators had not yet gone to the Georgetown house. They wanted the corporate systems, email, and financial data preserved before anyone in the family understood the scale of the investigation. By noon, Cole Aeronautics' email servers, financial systems, and accounting repositories had been preserved. Forensic imaging continued throughout the day. The basement analysis room had no windows. 6 specialists sat before 5 monitors each, and a 13-foot whiteboard was already full by the afternoon of the second day. The independent team reconstructed the network. I participated only as a subject matter expert on Aegis Hawk and procurement security procedures. I sat at the end of the table and read the materials I was authorized to receive. What emerged was not one isolated bribe. It was a system, and it had been operating for 11 years. Layer 1: the entities. 14 companies. None had identifiable operations or more than 4 employees. 3 were registered in Delaware, 2 in Wyoming, 4 in Singapore, 3 in Cyprus, 2 in Macau. The structure was always the same. Cole Aeronautics paid a U.S. company under a consulting agreement. The money moved through an entity in Cyprus, then to Singapore, and only then to the ultimate beneficiary. Every transaction had a contract and an invoice. Market positioning consulting, regulatory environment analysis, bid process optimization support. But no reports had been submitted. No deliverables existed. One Cyprus company invoiced $2,400,000 for a technical feasibility study that had already been completed 14 months earlier. Ryan had built the structure. His signature appeared on 8 of the 14 formation documents. In internal correspondence, he called it the Times architecture. Layer 2: the outgoing money. Since 2015, $219 million had been recorded under consulting and service contracts. The analysts initially identified the destinations of $173 million. $41 million went to political consulting firms. $32 million went to lawful, disclosed lobbying organizations. $28 million entered political support funds through intermediaries and required further review of the source and reporting. $72 million was transferred overseas and never returned. The destination of the remaining $46 million had not yet been identified. This was only a preliminary map based on internal ledgers, email, and domestic banking data. The international transactions still required verification. Layer 3: the list. An untitled spreadsheet was stored in Ryan's personal archive. 291 rows. Column A: name. Column B: agency or office. Column C: date. Column D: benefit provided. Column E: status times completed times, or times pending. The contents of column D were not always cash. A private flight to Aspen, for a family of 4, college tuition for the son of a senior aide, a vice presidency requiring no office attendance for a newly retired official, a Bethesda apartment rented at 1/3 of market value. 34 names had times completed times in the final column. 11 of them had attended meetings with me. There was one name on row 206 that I had to read 3 times. It belonged to the person who had written my recommendation when I entered the field. I did not let that memory change how I handled the data. I marked the row like the other 290 and transferred the entire file to the Public Integrity Unit. Layer 4, each member of the family. Thomas Cole. He did not open accounts. He did not form entities. He did not send direct emails about distributing money. He made phone calls and arranged dinners. But board minutes showed that he had approved 74 consulting expenditures. Each approval bore his handwritten signature. In an internal message to Ryan in 2019, he wrote, "Do not ask what they want. Find out and provide it before they have to ask." Ryan Cole. He managed the entire operating mechanism, entity structures, payment flows, contracts, and invoices. After the privilege review team segregated documents that could not be used, 46 communications remained about how to describe the expenditures. Ryan never asked whether the payments were lawful. He only asked what they should be called so they would not attract attention. Vanessa Cole. She was the registered owner of 2 companies, Meridian Crest Holdings in Delaware and Halcyon Vale Properties in Wyoming. Vanessa did not manage daily operations, but she signed the paperwork and benefited directly. The Colorado house she mentioned at dinner had been placed under contract the month before using Halcyon Vale funds. The money originated from a $1,800,000 consulting invoice with no deliverable. Diane Cole. No signature, account, or email directly connected her to the money flows. The dinner recording showed her pressuring me to sign the Cedar Ridge documents. But at that stage, there was not enough evidence to conclude that she knew precisely how the funds were allocated. Her ethical responsibility was clear. Her criminal responsibility was not. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, the investigators completed a preliminary matrix of conduct and potential violations: bribery of public officials, federal contract fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, coercion involving Cedar Ridge, unlawful interference with the defense procurement process, threatening a federal official. 7 categories of conduct required further verification. Aegis Hawk was only the 9th project on a list of 11. I stood and went to get coffee. When I returned, Priya, the digital forensics team lead, was standing in front of a monitor. Director Cole. She turned the screen toward me. In the forensic image of Ryan's drive, inside an old storage partition, there was an encrypted data container with no file extension. The initial indexing tool had classified it as unknown data. Its size was 412 megabytes. It had last been modified 9 days earlier. Priya opened the container's information panel. It had a name: Hawk Override Phase 2. Locating, extracting, and verifying the decryption key took 22 hours. Priya worked only from the forensic image. The original remained untouched in a sealed safe. Every action was logged so the result could be reproduced and verified. The key was in Ryan's browser data. He had saved it in his password manager beside the passwords for his online shopping accounts. At 4 p.m. on the 4th day, the container opened. It held 3 things. First, source code: 19 files totaling more than 20,000 lines. Second, a specification document, the same PDF I had seen from the hallway. Aegis Remote Recovery Protocol, Reverend 4.2, 41 pages. Third, a folder containing 46 messages between Ryan and an address associated with Helix Meridian, spanning 14 months. I read the specification first. It was very well written. That was the first thing I noted, and it disturbed me more than the content itself. The author understood Department of Defense technical document standards. The heading structure, terminology, and requirement numbering were all correct. If the document appeared in an ordinary submission package, it could easily be mistaken for a legitimate contingency function. Section 1.2 stated its purpose: restore control of unmanned aircraft if the primary command station was disabled. That was a real operational requirement. If the ground station was destroyed, a backup station had to be able to assume control. Otherwise, aircraft already in operation could lose communication or control. Through the end of Section 3, I still saw nothing improper. The problem was in Section 4. Every legitimate takeover command had to be authenticated with a Department of Defense security key. But this module accepted an additional, secondary authentication source outside the government system. I read the line 3 times, then called Priya over. Priya, find this condition in the source code. She opened the newly decrypted code package. The important point was that this code had never appeared in any submission Cole Aeronautics provided to the government. It belonged to a final integration package scheduled to be loaded after the baseline design was approved. That was why my team could not have detected it in the 3 earlier review rounds. The entire module had been kept outside the official record. Priya found a second condition in the authentication function, a single times or times statement. If the takeover command was signed with the external authentication source's key, the system accepted it as equivalent to a command issued by the Department of Defense. The author did not need to obfuscate the code or hide the condition. They only needed to make certain no one in the government saw the module before it entered the delivered product. We reconstructed the function in an isolated laboratory that evening. No connection to an external network. No operational equipment. The entire test took place in a simulated environment with 3 unmanned aircraft models, 1 legitimate command station, and the remote recovery module loaded exactly as it appeared in the code recovered from Ryan's computer. Priya operated the legitimate command station. An engineer named Dawes used the second machine, representing the party holding the external authentication key. I stood behind them. Begin, I said. The 3 simulated aircraft followed the route Priya had set. Her monitor displayed position, fuel, mission payload, and communications status. Dawes sent a takeover command. The system accepted it. Priya's screen displayed no alert or error. The data fields simply stopped updating one after another under the label times transitioning to standby. Seconds later, all 3 aircraft changed course. They did not crash or stop. They continued flying steadily as though they had received a completely valid command. 1 aircraft received new target coordinates. Priya had not issued them. On Dawes's screen, the legitimate station's data appeared in full: ground unit positions, mission coordinates, vehicle status, and open communications channels. In the test configuration, Priya had lost both control and data access. The entire process took less than half a minute. Logs, I said. Priya opened the command station's local logs. The module did not leave a gap. It replaced the true trace with a pre-constructed legitimate maintenance session. The logs showed that the transfer had been scheduled in advance and completed normally. External monitoring sources still required separate testing, but at the control system level, an operator would see maintenance rather than an unauthorized takeover. No one in the room spoke. Dawes broke the silence. "This is not merely a back door," he said. "It is full control of the entire system." The secondary authentication source was registered to a commercial entity. Its infrastructure was located outside the United States. The counterintelligence team coordinated with partner agencies to trace the ownership structure. Preliminary results arrived on the morning of the 5th day. Helix Meridian maintained an office in Singapore, had very few registered employees, and had almost no public product presence. Behind it were 3 layers of ownership entities. The final entity in the chain had appeared in counterintelligence reports from 2 allied countries. Both reports connected it to technology acquisition activity, serving a foreign intelligence service. The preliminary assessment was highly reliable, though formal confirmation remained in progress. Helix Meridian was not merely providing technical consulting. It was a technology acquisition channel. The correspondence, invoices, and payment milestones showed that the $15 million allocated to Helix in the block transfer was payment to complete and integrate the remote recovery module. The code had been written. The module had been tested. The integration package was ready to be inserted into the deliverable build after Aegis Hawk passed final security certification. The certification bore my name. I remained in the analysis room after most of the team left to rest. Aegis Hawk was not a standalone system. It had been designed as the foundation for the next generation of unmanned aircraft command systems. The initial contract was worth $680 million, but deployment would not end there. I opened the Phase 1 deployment plan: 14 units, 4 regional commands, 3 overseas bases. If the security certification were signed, installation would begin and proceed in stages over 18 months. At that point, a foreign party could have the ability to disrupt communications, read battlefield data, seize aircraft control, and alter target coordinates across 14 U.S. units in less than half a minute. The local logs would describe the event as ordinary maintenance. They might not use the capability immediately. A tool like that was most valuable when no one knew it existed. It could remain dormant until the exact moment when simultaneous loss of control across multiple units would cause the greatest harm. I thought about the dinner in Georgetown. Only a few days earlier, my family had viewed Aegis Hawk as a road to money, status, and power. I had sat at the end of the table believing the thing they were gambling was a farm in Maryland, but Cedar Ridge had never been the only asset placed on the table. Priya returned to the room when the clock was nearing 1 in the morning. She carried a file recovered from deleted data inside the encrypted container. "We found one more message," she said. It was message number 47. It had been sent 9 days earlier, the same day the container was last modified. It contained only 6 lines and did not mention money directly. The Helix contact asked Ryan what contingency Cole Aeronautics had prepared if the module was discovered after deployment. Ryan replied that the contingency was ready. He would send the details through another channel. I read those 2 lines. An undisclosed module, a foreign authentication source, a system that could be seized. And somewhere, Ryan had already selected someone to take the blame if it was discovered. I picked up the secure phone and called Priya, even though she was standing on the other side of the room. Not because she could not hear me. Because from the next question forward, every exchange had to be recorded on the official channel. She answered the call. "Priya," I said, "if the system is discovered, who do they intend to blame?" Priya found it at 4:20 a.m. She sent me a short message. "Director Cole, return to the analysis room." When I got downstairs, Priya was standing in front of the monitor. The coffee on the desk had gone completely cold. "I found the other channel Ryan mentioned in the message," she said. "It was not in the email system. The material was hidden on Cole Aeronautics' internal legal server, inside a restricted records storage area. The privilege screening team reviewed it before transferring it to the investigative team. The files did not contain valid legal advice. They were materials used to fabricate evidence and construct a false narrative. Ryan stored them under an internal matter number." Priya turned the monitor toward me. "CA 201901114 Inheritance Dispute Contingency Plan." The matter had been created in 2019. For years, there had been almost no activity. Files began appearing in August of the previous year. I pulled out a chair and sat down. There were 4 categories of material. Category 1. My identifying information. Social security number, date of birth, former Alexandria address, a copy of my driver's license, 2 email addresses I no longer used. None of it was a national security secret. It was the kind of information a family knows about one of its members. No one had to breach a system to obtain it. It existed in insurance files, Cedar Ridge records, and the boxes of documents my mother still kept upstairs. Ryan had turned information the family held to protect me into raw material for a case against me. Category 2. Technical traces. The first file contained my former account name from a 2019 project. The account had been disabled long ago. It could not access any system, but its format was enough for Ryan to construct a plausible-looking current username. The second file was a technical acceptance certificate I had signed on a civilian fleet maintenance project. Cole Aeronautics had been a subcontractor and received a copy. Ryan had retained it since 2019. The document's digital certificate had expired. It could not create a valid cryptographic signature on a new record, but the visible signature block, signer name, and identifier could still be copied into a fraudulent PDF. It would not survive forensic examination, but it could deceive an ordinary reader or a reporter racing to publish. Beside it were 11 public technical reports I had written. They were there because of my writing style. Category 3. Prepared false files. The first was a 2-page technical memorandum dated March 14. Supplemental Assessment Remote Control Recovery Mechanism. It recommended approving the remote recovery module on the ground that it satisfied operational requirements during communications disruption. The format, headings, and numbering matched agency standards. At the end of the document was my name and a signature block copied from the 2019 record. I had never written or signed that memorandum. A casual reader would have difficulty recognizing it as false, but the file creation data, expired certificate, and edit history would not withstand forensic examination. Ryan did not need the document to survive forever. He only needed it to survive long enough for me to be suspended and convicted in public before the fabrication was proved. The next file had been created in the precise format of a system log export. It claimed that an account bearing my name had accessed the Aegis Hawk source code repository 4 times. 3 of the dates fell on weekends. On one of them, I had been at Cedar Ridge. This was not a log from the official authentication system, but if it were given to the media with the false memorandum, it would be enough to create suspicion and encourage restrictions on my access during an investigation. The final file was a backup signature package. A signature page bearing my name had already been completed with the copied signature block. One line appeared in the internal notes. Use the remotely executed version only if a direct signature is not received before the deadline. Ryan had prepared for both outcomes. If I signed at dinner, he would use the real signature. If I refused, he would use the false one. Category 4. The communications plan. A press release. An executive question and answer document. A list of selected reporters who would receive the information first. The story had already been written. Cole Aeronautics was the victim of internal sabotage. The company was cooperating fully with investigators. The responsible individual was a disgruntled member of the founding family who had disputed inherited property and resented her brother's success. They had not only prepared false evidence, they had prepared the way the public would interpret it. Priya remained beside the monitor. "There is one more document," she said. "Director Cole needs to see this herself." She opened the complete draft of the $45 million loan file. Appendix B contained a line that did not appear in the set Ryan had shown me at dinner. Guarantor, Megan A. Cole. Relationship to borrower. Indirect shareholder through family trust. Collateral. Cedar Ridge Farm. The information was entirely false. I owned no Cole Aeronautics shares, and had no economic interest in any trust connected to the company. That fact had already been disclosed and verified in my ethics file. But if the false appendix were combined with the backup signature page, it would create a different story. I would not appear to be someone coerced into pledging her property. I would appear to be a voluntary guarantor with a financial connection to the loan that paid Helix Meridian. The file also listed 4 people prepared to testify that I understood the terms and signed voluntarily. My father, my mother, Ryan, Vanessa. I had believed they needed Cedar Ridge only because it was a clean, debt-free asset legally separate from Cole Aeronautics. That was only the first reason. The second was the most dangerous part. Cedar Ridge was being used to create a financial trail leading directly to me. When remote recovery was discovered, they would already have a security official with a personal motive, a financial link to the foreign vendor, a username, an approval memorandum, and a signature page. Motive. Money trail. Access. Documentation. Those 4 things would not be enough to convict me in court. But they would be enough to suspend me, investigate me, and convict me in the public eye before any expert could prove they were fabricated. I had once thought the worst thing my family could do was pretend I did not exist. I was wrong. They intended to make me unmistakably present in an investigation of espionage and an attempted intrusion into defense systems. Ryan had even written the motive in advance. I had done it because I was jealous of my brother. At dinner, Ryan had said no one would believe me. Now I understood why he had been so confident. He had spent 14 months ensuring that when the truth surfaced, every first trace would point to me. At 8 that morning, I called General Hale. He answered immediately. I gave him only the information he needed. "General Hale, I need an interagency meeting today. This is no longer a bribery case. This is a prepared internal attack, and they have already selected the person they intend to blame." The meeting began at 2 p.m., in a closed room on the 3rd floor, with no windows and no personal devices. 11 people sat around the table. General Marcus Hale, the Department of Defense procurement representative, the head of counterintelligence at the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, 2 FBI agents from the National Security Division, a prosecutor from the Department of Justice National Security Division, 2 military intelligence representatives, PRIA, an attorney from my agency responsible for conflicts of interest, and me. I presented for 26 minutes. I did not tell a family story. I presented 4 categories of evidence. First, the recording lasting more than half an hour, together with a transcript and authentication records. Second, an 11-year financial flow map involving $219 million, 14 intermediary entities, and a list of 291 people who had received benefits or were being approached. Third, the isolated laboratory test results. I played the screen recording. In less than half a minute, 3 simulated unmanned aircraft changed course. 1 received new target coordinates, the legitimate command station lost control, and the local log was replaced with a fabricated maintenance session. No one in the room spoke until the recording ended. Fourth, the internal CA 201901114 file, and the plan to place all responsibility on me. When I finished the 4th section, the FBI agent seated across from me set down his pen. "We arrest them today," he said. "Thomas Cole and Ryan Cole. Based on what I have just heard, I see no reason they should remain free another night." Several people around the table nodded. I understood why. From his position, it was a reasonable decision. "If we arrest them today," I said, "we will stop Aegis Hawk and detain the 2 direct operators. But the rest of the network will know it has been exposed." Everyone at the table looked at me. I brought the financial flow diagram onto the screen. 34 people on the list have received benefits. 11 participated in meetings connected to the procurement process. None has been interviewed. I pointed to the branches on the diagram. The moment the arrests become public, some of them will contact one another, retain counsel, or destroy data before investigative teams can preserve it. I advanced to the next page. Helix Meridian is not merely a company. It is a technology acquisition channel. We have traced infrastructure outside the United States and the chain of ownership entities, but we have not identified everyone controlling the far end. I paused. Aegis Hawk is the 9th project on a list of 11. Arresting them today will stop one system, but it will not tell us where else a similar module may have been placed. The Department of Justice prosecutor spoke. "What does Director Cole propose?" "The $45 million is still being held at the correspondent bank. Cole Aeronautics believes the transaction is delayed only by technical review." I opened the coordination plan with the bank. "Do not let the funds reach Helix, but the bank can allow payment messages to proceed through controlled stages. The other side will believe the transaction is completing and send receiving instructions, allocation accounts, or requests for confirmation." "That allows us to observe their response?" one agent asked. "Yes. The transaction remains under control. International coordination requests have also been prepared so the receiving accounts cannot move funds beyond monitored reach." General Hale looked at me. "For how long?" "Until tomorrow night." "Why tomorrow night?" "Because tomorrow night Thomas, Ryan, and Vanessa will voluntarily appear at the same location." I opened the event security diagram. "They have been pre-screened, their movement routes are controlled, and personal devices are restricted within the secure area. After the Aegis Hawk determination is announced, they can be taken separately to different conference rooms before anyone can warn the rest of the network." No one mentioned the press. That was not why the Pentagon was chosen. The reason was that the 3 suspects could be separated and served simultaneously inside an existing security perimeter. The discussion continued for another 40 minutes. The final plan was a joint decision by the agencies around the table. Aegis Hawk was found ineligible for security certification through an internal determination effective immediately. The contract could not be awarded regardless of how the investigation proceeded. Sealed arrest warrants for Thomas Cole, Ryan Cole, and Vanessa Cole were sought and made ready for service. Preservation orders and asset restrictions were prepared for simultaneous execution. The $45 million remained on hold. The Interagency Financial Investigations team would monitor the payment messages and Helix Meridian's response. The final Aegis Hawk program announcement would still take place Thursday evening at the Pentagon. The Cole family continued receiving the original schedule. No one contacted them. Nothing indicated that the true decision had already been made. After the determination was announced, Thomas, Ryan, and Vanessa would be taken to 3 separate secure rooms. The arrest warrants would be served there, not on the stage or in front of the press area. Then my agency's attorney spoke. He waited until near the end because this was the uncomfortable part. Director Cole cannot sign Aegis Hawk's final assessment. No one objected. Director Cole is related by blood to the contractor's leadership and is the victim of a framing scheme directly connected to this file. If her signature appears on the final determination, defense counsel will attack that conflict, and they will be right to do so. I know, I said. I recused myself from signing last Friday morning. I placed the determination on the table. The Deputy Director for Technical Affairs has delegated authority to sign in my place. He completed the assessment at 11 this morning. My only role is to present the technical findings. I looked around the table. I do not need my signature on it. I need it to be correct. The meeting ended at 4:10 p.m. Everyone left the room one at a time under procedure. General Hale remained until last. He stood, fastened his jacket, and stopped beside my chair. "You are not required to attend Thursday night," he said. "Your deputy can present the determination. No one here would fault you. From a record standpoint, it would be simpler." He looked at me. "Are you sure you want to face them there?" I gathered the documents and stood. That is where they believe they are going to be honored. During the final hours before the announcement, my family continued producing evidence against themselves. A court had approved a limited electronic surveillance order covering Thomas's and Ryan's phones and corporate accounts directly connected to Aegis Hawk, Helix Meridian, and the transfer. No surveillance was conducted inside the Georgetown residence. I did not listen directly. Because I was related to the subjects and was the victim of the framing plan, I received only excerpts relevant to the security of Thursday night's operation. Wednesday afternoon, the bank notified Cole Aeronautics that the $45 million transaction had cleared final review and was awaiting settlement. The money remained under control, but Ryan believed it was about to reach the Singapore account. Minutes later, he called Helix Meridian. The call lasted 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Ryan confirmed that the transaction was completing and asked only one question: had the module been integrated into the build that would be delivered to the military? The other side confirmed it was already in the final integration package. Ryan said, "Then after Thursday it is your responsibility." Over the next 2 hours, Helix sent instructions allocating the funds in 11 different directions. The financial investigations team recorded all 11. Wednesday evening, Thomas made a series of calls to confirm the Pentagon schedule. He asked who would stand beside the podium. He asked whether photographs would be taken before or after the speech. He asked for the names of the people seated in the first 3 rows. During one call he said, "You just stay where you are. After Thursday night, everything we discussed in April becomes real." The person receiving the call was the name on row 206 of the spreadsheet. The person who had signed my recommendation when I was 24. I read the excerpt and moved to the next item. Vanessa sent the next payment for the Colorado house. $3,800,000. The money came from an account belonging to Halcyon Vale Properties, LLC. My mother called me 4 times. I answered the second call. She did not ask whether I was all right. She did not ask where I was. She said my father still had not called the attorneys about the will, that the door was still open, and that if I returned and signed before Thursday night, everything could be treated as though it had never happened. She said, "I do not understand what you are trying to prove." I did not answer. "I did not ask your father or Ryan what they needed the signature for." She continued, "I only know the entire family is counting on you." The remaining 3 calls went to voicemail. The message was always the same: "Come back. Sign the papers. Do not ruin Ryan's future." I told her nothing. Not because I was angry. Because I was not permitted to. Thursday, 6:12 a.m. Ryan sent me a text. It was the first message he had sent since the Georgetown dinner. "I know you are still angry, but you should watch the news tonight. 7 o'clock every channel. After tonight, I will be sitting in a different position, and I will remember who stood with me and who did not. Tonight you will see who the real winner is. I read it at 6:20 while tying back my hair in front of the mirror. I transferred the message into the evidence repository, added a timestamp, and closed the system. With every update, I kept waiting for one of them to hesitate. A call in which Ryan asked whether they should stop. A sentence in which Thomas admitted they had gone too far. Some indication that Vanessa understood where the money she was spending had come from. One moment when my mother asked what my signature would actually finance. Nothing. They did not stop because none of them believed there was anything that needed to stop. In their minds, the only person standing in the way was a contractor earning $94,000 a year who had been thrown out of the house and removed from the guest list. I stood from the vanity at 6:25. The black suit was hanging on the door. The black government credential was inside the inner pocket. 12 hours and 35 minutes remained. Thursday, 6:42 p.m. Camera flashes fired non-stop outside the Pentagon's river entrance. Senators, generals, and defense industry executives filed through the security barriers. Television trucks lined the sidewalk. I am telling this scene a second time now, and this time you know everything that only I knew that night. You know what the card in my pocket was. You know Aegis Hawk had been found ineligible for security certification the previous afternoon, and 3 sealed arrest warrants were waiting to be served. You also know the $45 million remained under control, but Helix Meridian had already sent complete allocation instructions to 11 destinations. My family arrived at 6:45. My father wore a custom-tailored tuxedo. My mother wore her pearls. Ryan adjusted his cufflinks for the cameras. Vanessa stepped out of the car, letting the train of her gown sweep across the granite. Vanessa's mother followed behind her, purse over one arm, looking around like someone who had finally entered a place she had heard about all her life. My father saw me walking toward the security desk. He stepped directly into my path. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for work." He held up his invitation and tilted it so the lights caught the Department of Defense seal. "Your name is not on the list. This is no place for someone who fixes computers." The previous evening, in the surveillance excerpt, I had read what he said to the person on row 206. "You just stay where you are. Call a car and go home." Ryan did not look at me. "Do not stand here." At 6:12 that morning, he had texted that tonight I would see who the real winner was. Vanessa looked my black suit up and down. "You actually wore that to the Pentagon? People will think you came to hand out programs." The $3,800,000 she had transferred the previous day came from Halcyon Vale Properties LLC. "Megan, if you go in there, you will embarrass the entire family." My mother lowered her voice. "You understand." She had been given 4 opportunities to ask one question. She had used none of them. I did not explain. I did not argue. I walked around them to the second security desk, the one with no line. I placed my black government credential on the reader. Its face displayed only my photograph, identifier, and a security strip. The scanner gave a sharp beep. The screen switched to high-level verification mode. The security officer read the text that appeared and stood straighter. "Director Cole, please wait one moment." The secure corridor door opened. General Marcus Hale approached, the general officer insignia on his shoulders catching the light. He extended his hand. "Director Cole, the Secretary of Defense is waiting for you in the conference room." He turned to the officer. "The director's seat at the head table is ready." The blood drained from my father's face. Ryan stood frozen, his hand still on his cufflink. He heard my title and saw a general come out personally to greet me. Those 2 details were enough for him to begin understanding that there was an entire part of my life he had never known. Vanessa stared at the government credential on the counter. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I took back the credential, slipped it into my inner pocket, and looked at my father. "You were right," I said. "Not everyone was invited tonight for the same reason." Then I passed through the security door into the corridor reserved for cleared personnel, a place his guest invitation did not permit him to enter. The 5 of them remained behind the control line, but only briefly. Their schedule had not changed. They would still be escorted into the event space. They would still sit in the rows my father had arranged through phone calls. And they would still wait for the moment when they believed the entire room would rise to honor the Cole name. I was not in the main hall for nearly the next hour. I was in the conference room with General Hale, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, and 2 Department of Justice officials, reviewing the sequence of the 8 p.m. program one final time. But I knew what happened at table 4. 3 people participating in the operation were seated at that table, each carrying an approved recording device. A preliminary transcript was on my desk before midnight. My family was escorted into the main hall at 6:58. They were seated at table 4, in the second row of the corporate section, slightly to the right of the podium. It was a good position. Cameras from 2 news services swept across the table whenever they captured a wide shot. The round table had 10 seats. My father, my mother, Ryan, Vanessa, and Vanessa's mother sat together. 3 other seats belonged to guests placed there by event organizers. The final 2 were assigned to representatives of other contractors. There were 7 members of the operation within a 13-foot radius of the table. The man seated to my father's left was introduced as a vice president of a mid-size contractor in Huntsville. He was the FBI agent leading the federal contract fraud team. The woman seated across from Ryan wore a badge identifying her as legal counsel for an industry association. She was an agent with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. The man beside Vanessa was introduced as the representative of an investment fund with an office in Singapore. He was a cooperating witness who had previously acted as an intermediary in communications with Helix Meridian and had met Ryan twice. The remaining 4 personnel wore dress uniforms and stood at the exits. My father was silent for the first 15 minutes. Then he began to speak, in the manner of a man trying to convince himself. "Megan is only the director of a technical division," he told Ryan. "The Department of Defense has hundreds of director titles. Do not overreact." "Yes. And if Megan really does have a role in the assessment, that may actually help us." He turned his wineglass. "The company has been waiting on those technical certifications for 3 years. We had a family member in the right place and never knew it." The agent seated to his left poured more water and remarked that technical certification cycles did often delay schedules. My father nodded in agreement. Ryan did not agree. During the first 15 minutes, he spoke only twice. The first time he asked Vanessa, "Do you remember how far Megan was sitting from me that night?" The second time he said to my father, "I need to speak to Megan privately before the announcement." "For what?" "To make her sign the loan certification." "Megan will not sign." "Megan will sign." Ryan set down his glass. "If she really has a place in the assessment process, then she has a career to lose too. I will explain exactly what happens to that career if the contract is not awarded tonight. She will not dare make a scene here." The recording device carried by the female agent across from him captured every word. Vanessa leaned toward her mother and pointed at the general's tables. "Look at the first row, Mom. After tonight, our family will be sitting there." My mother said nothing. She looked toward the secure corridor door 3 times. At 7:32, the servers brought out the main course. The man posing as the investment fund representative turned to Ryan. Because they had met during earlier communications, the question did not make Ryan suspicious. "Is the Singapore package already in the final integration build?" Ryan took a sip of wine. "Yes." "The remote recovery component?" Ryan looked at him for a second. "Complete. You did not put it in the official specification?" Ryan laughed. "If we described its true function in the specification, it would never pass review. So we kept it in the final integration package." "Any risk?" "After tonight, the rest belongs to Helix." The man nodded and changed the subject. He did not need to ask anything else. Ryan had just confirmed 3 facts. He knew the module existed, knew it had been kept outside the official file, and knew Helix would take over the work after Aegis Hawk was announced. At 7:54, my father adjusted his tie. He addressed the entire table without lowering his voice. "After the announcement, we will deal with Megan next week. If she sits in that process and turns against the family, she will not remain there for long." 3 recording devices captured the statement. No one at the table reacted. The lights in the main hall dimmed slightly. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and opened the folder in front of him. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now present the final security determination for the Aegis Hawk program." My father fastened his jacket and sat straighter. Ryan turned toward the stage and held a carefully measured smile. Vanessa placed a hand on her husband's forearm. Vanessa's mother leaned forward for a better view. The master of ceremonies turned to the next page. The final security determination will be presented by the Director of Defense Acquisition Systems Security. He paused for half a beat. Please welcome Director Megan Cole. I entered through the door to the left of the stage. Applause rose. The people at the head table and in several front rows stood as a matter of protocol. It was not a gesture reserved for me. The three presenters before me had been received the same way. But I knew Table 4 did not see it as routine protocol. The screen behind me displayed my name, full title, and agency seal. I placed the folder on the podium and adjusted the microphone. From there, I could see Table 4 clearly. My father did not stand. He remained seated, one hand still on the button of his jacket. Ryan held his smile for about 2 more seconds, and then it left his face. Vanessa looked up at the screen and read my title a second time. My mother did not look at the screen. She looked directly at me. Mr. Secretary, distinguished guests. Aegis Hawk is a command and communications system for military unmanned aircraft. Under the proposed deployment plan, it would be installed across multiple units, regional commands, and overseas bases, and would serve as the foundation for the next generation of command systems. My agency's role in this process is narrow. We do not select the contractor. We do not set the price. We answer one question: when this system is connected to the defense network, does it satisfy security requirements? Tonight, I am presenting the answer to that question. I turn to the second page. First, a procedural point. I did not sign this assessment. As soon as the matter was transferred to an independent team last Friday morning, I recused myself as the signatory because of my family relationship to the contractor's leadership. The determination was signed by the Deputy Director for Technical Affairs under delegated authority and was subjected to independent review. I am presenting the determination. I did not create it. Several people in the front row lowered their heads to take notes. At Table 4, Ryan leaned forward. My father turned to look at him, but Ryan did not respond. The technical determination rests on 3 principal findings. Finding 1. A remote control component exists in Aegis Hawk's final integration package, but does not appear in the official materials the contractor submitted to the government. The component does not appear in the technical specification. It does not appear in the architecture diagrams. It does not appear in the declared function inventory submitted for review. The screen behind me changed to a diagram stripped of all sensitive information. The stated function of this component is to restore control if the primary command station is disabled. That operational need is legitimate. Every critical command system requires a backup mechanism. The problem is how control is transferred. I looked down at the folder and continued. Every legitimate takeover command must be authenticated by a security key source within infrastructure approved by the Department of Defense. This undeclared component accepts a second authentication source. That source lies outside infrastructure approved by the United States government. The hall was silent. I let the statement remain there for a beat. In an independent test conducted in an isolated laboratory, the external authentication source seized control of the system in less than half a minute. The legitimate command station lost control. Mission data transferred to the controlling party. The simulated vehicles changed course, and one received new target coordinates that the legitimate command station had not issued. No intrusion warning appeared on the operator interface. The local logs displayed the event as an ordinary maintenance session. A chair shifted slightly in the generals section. No one spoke. This was not an accidental defect that reviewers overlooked. The component was withheld from the official submission and prepared for insertion into the integration package after baseline review was complete. It did not slip through. It was deliberately held back for later insertion. At Table 4, Vanessa's smile vanished. My father continued looking at the stage, but one hand tightened around the stem of his glass. Ryan was no longer looking at me. He was looking at the diagram behind me. Finding 2. The undeclared component is connected to a foreign partner that does not appear in the approved supply chain. Technical documents, communications, and integration data show that the component was completed before the final security assessment was signed. A related payment was intercepted before it left the control of the banking system. The source, purpose, and associated allocation instructions remain under investigation by the appropriate authorities. I did not name Helix Meridian. I did not display the diagram of the 11 receiving points. I did not mention the Allied counterintelligence reports. That information did not belong in that room. But Ryan knew who I was talking about. He looked toward my father. This time, my father looked back. Neither man said a word. Finding 3. The assessment identified evidence of deliberate interference with the review process and the preparation of false documents intended to shift responsibility for the undeclared component onto a federal official. Those documents did not withstand forensic examination. The detailed materials have been referred to the Department of Justice and the appropriate investigative agencies. Because the investigation is ongoing, I cannot present further details. I stopped. That was all I was permitted to say publicly. I did not mention Cedar Ridge. I did not mention the recording that lasted longer than half an hour. I did not say that Ryan had retained my old signature since 2019. I did not say that my family had prepared a press release explaining that I had betrayed them out of jealousy. But at table 4, both Thomas and Ryan understood. Ryan rose from his chair. Vanessa caught his sleeve and pulled him back down. The agent seated across from Ryan did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the stage like every other guest. My father turned toward the exit. The 4 personnel in dress uniform remained in position. No one had moved yet. I turned to the final page. Conclusion. 1. Aegis Hawk does not satisfy the requirements for system security certification. This determination became effective yesterday afternoon. 2. As a result, the $680 million contract award process is suspended immediately. 3. The contractor's related access privileges have been suspended under system protection procedures. Matters beyond the technical scope have been referred to the Department of Justice and the appropriate investigative authorities. There was no applause. No one expected applause after a determination like that. I closed the folder. In every security assessment, the standard does not change with the contractor's name, the contract's value, or a personal relationship. A system is certified because it satisfies the standard, or it is rejected because it does not. Aegis Hawk does not satisfy that standard and will not be certified. I stepped back from the microphone. At table 4, my father was staring at me. He was not flushed. He was not angry. He was calculating. His gaze moved from me to the screen and then to Ryan. When the color in his face changed, I knew he had understood that the dinner recording no longer existed only inside the Georgetown dining room. Ryan stood again. This time, Vanessa did not pull him down quickly enough. Ryan, my father said quietly. He did not listen. Or pretended not to. Ryan took one step away from the table, and the FBI agent seated to my father's left stood as well. He did not touch Ryan. He only said, "Mr. Cole, the program has not concluded. Please return to your seat." Ryan looked at the identification badge on the man's chest. For the first time that evening, he read it carefully. The Master of Ceremonies returned to the podium. "Thank you, Director Cole. The program will take a brief recess before the next portion." The lights in the hall brightened slightly. Conversation began rising around the tables. In the left aisle, 3 security officers left their positions and approached table 4 from 3 directions. A 4th remained at the exit. They did not draw handcuffs. They did not read arrest warrants. Not there. One stopped beside Thomas. One stood behind Ryan. The remaining officer approached Vanessa. "Mr. Thomas Cole, Mr. Ryan Cole, and Miss Vanessa Cole," the team leader said. "Please come with us to complete a mandatory security procedure." My father looked directly at me across the space between the 2 rows of tables. "What is happening?" my mother asked. No one answered her. Thomas stood first. Ryan looked toward the main doors and then at the 4 people controlling the exits. Vanessa tightened her grip on her purse. The security team's task was not yet to serve arrest warrants in the main hall. First, the 3 of them had to be separated. No phones, no communication, no opportunity to coordinate their accounts. 3 different corridors led to 3 secure rooms prepared in advance. And in each room, a sealed arrest warrant waited to be served. I did not return to my seat. As soon as Thomas, Ryan, and Vanessa were escorted from the hall, I was taken to the command room at the end of the secure corridor. I did not participate in serving the arrest warrants. I did not stand where they could see me. I was present only to answer technical questions if the execution team needed confirmation of an Aegis Hawk detail. The three were taken down separate corridors into 3 prepared rooms. No phones. No communication. No opportunity to coordinate their accounts. What happened behind those 3 doors? I learned from the service reports and the portions of the recordings I was later authorized to review. In the first room, the man who had sat beside my father for nearly an hour closed the door. He took a wallet from his inner pocket, opened it, and placed his Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials on the table. My father looked at them. Then he looked up at the face of the man who had just shared dinner with him. "Mr. Thomas Cole," the agent said, "you are under arrest pursuant to a sealed federal warrant. Please stand, keep your hands visible, and follow instructions." My father did not resist. He stood, placed both hands on the table as instructed, and allowed the agents to search him. He was then informed that the warrant concerned preliminary allegations of federal contract fraud, bribery, money laundering, conspiracy, and unlawful transfer of defense technology. He did not ask whether they had the wrong man. He asked only, "Where is Ryan?" No one answered. In the second room, Ryan turned back the moment he crossed the threshold. "I need to speak to my father." The female DCIS agent stepped between him and the door. "You will not communicate with any other person detained in this operation. I am the company's attorney." She opened her credential wallet and held the badge at his eye level. "Mr. Ryan Cole, you are under arrest pursuant to a sealed federal warrant." Ryan stared at her. She had sat across from him in the main hall and listened as he confirmed that the Singapore module had been kept outside the official specification. "Who are you?" She gave him her name and title. Ryan was silent for several seconds, then said, "I am General Counsel for Cole Aeronautics. You cannot speak to Thomas Cole outside my presence." "You are also under arrest in the same matter," she replied. "You do not represent anyone in this room." Ryan demanded a phone call. The request was denied until the security search and service of the warrant were complete. He asked where his phone was. No one answered. He demanded permission to contact the company's technology department. The request was recorded. After the warrant was served, his rights were read, and he was asked whether he wanted an attorney. "I am an attorney. Do you want an attorney to represent you?" Ryan did not answer immediately. An agent placed a copy of the arrest warrant on the table. For the first time since entering the room, Ryan looked down. In the third room, Vanessa stepped backward as soon as the 2 agents closed the door. "I did not do anything," she said very quickly. "I did not sign any technical documents. I do not know how that module works. Ryan did everything." An agent instructed her to sit. "Ryan ran all of it," Vanessa continued. "He created the companies. He told me to sign. I only did what he said." "Miss Vanessa Cole, you are under arrest pursuant to a sealed federal warrant." She stopped speaking. After her rights were read, Vanessa asked, "What if I cooperate?" The agent told her that no one in the room had authority to promise her anything. Vanessa requested an attorney. The interview stopped immediately. The next morning, through counsel, she offered to cooperate and provide information about Meridian Crest Holdings and Halcyon Vale properties. But that night, before any agreement existed, her first statement remained. Ryan did everything. 11 minutes after the 3 doors closed, an agent entered the command room. "All 3 warrants have been served," he said. I nodded. I did not ask how they had reacted. Not because I did not want to know, because I had no role in that part. I had presented the technical determination. The rest belonged to the courts, the Department of Justice, and the investigative agencies. I was gathering my materials when the command room door opened again. A security officer said my father was being moved through the north corridor toward the secure transport area. He had seen me through the open doorway and asked to stop. I stepped into the corridor. My father stood between 2 agents, his hands secured in front of him. He called my name, "Megan." One agent placed a hand on his shoulder. My father did not move. "Megan, tell them," he said. His voice had changed completely. The cold tone of a man ending a negotiation was gone. "Tell them this is an internal family misunderstanding. We can sit down tomorrow and resolve everything." He stepped toward me but was held back. "You have authority. You just stood on that stage. People listen to you. You only have to say one sentence." "I do not have that authority, Dad," I said. "I did not order the arrests, and I do not decide whether charges are brought. Those decisions belong to the court and the Department of Justice. I only presented the technical determination. But you can explain. No. He looked at me as though it were the first time in my life I had used that word and he could not change it. This is a family matter. It stopped being a family matter when Cole Aeronautics concealed a foreign module inside a defense system. I did not know Ryan had. You approved the money flow. You pressured me over Cedar Ridge. You threatened my career to force me to sign. You can explain the rest to your attorney. He opened his mouth. I finished first. The service members who would have relied on that system are not my family, but my job is to protect them. His expression changed. Hope disappeared first. Then the warm voice he had just tried to use. You are destroying your family. I looked at him standing in the hallway of the building he had spent 30 years trying to enter. The family did that to itself before I ever walked into this room. The agents moved him onward. He did not look back again. My mother was not arrested that night. She was taken to a waiting room outside the warrant service area. An agent explained that she was not being detained and asked whether she would agree to a voluntary interview. She asked, "Where are my husband and my son?" The agent said they were being processed under court orders. She replied that she wanted an attorney before saying anything else. The exchange ended. When I passed the waiting room door, she saw me. She stood. "Make them stop." I stopped walking. "That is your father," she said. "That is your brother. Look at what you are doing." "I am not doing this, Mom. The court issued the orders. The agents are carrying them out. But if you had not gone on to that stage, Aegis Hawk would still have failed security review whether I presented the determination or someone else did." She shook her head. "You always think you are right." "No, I only know the record is right this time." She said nothing else. Neither did I. Thomas, Ryan, and Vanessa were removed from the event area through 3 different corridors. None of them saw the others. After initial processing, Ryan was transferred to a federal detention facility. Thomas was taken by another route. Vanessa was held separately to prevent any communication before her attorney arrived. In the main hall, the program was paused. Guests were asked to remain in place briefly while a security matter was addressed. No one on the stage announced that anyone had been arrested. No one thanked the investigators. No one read Thomas's, Ryan's, or Vanessa's names to the press. After the area was confirmed secure, the master of ceremonies returned to the podium. He announced that the remainder of the event would be shortened and that guests would be escorted from the building in groups. A limited statement was released afterward. It confirmed only that Aegis Hawk had not been certified, that the contract award process was suspended, and that a federal investigation was underway. Nothing more. I did not return to my seat. I walked into the corridor, found a window, and stood there for a while. From that window, I could see the riverside parking lot, yellow lights, and dark water beyond. I stood there long enough to wait and see whether I would feel anything. There was nothing. No sense of victory, no relief, no pain. Only a vast quiet, like a sound that had been playing for 11 years and had finally been switched off. The operation continued throughout the night. At 8:47 p.m., 5 minutes after service of all 3 arrest warrants was confirmed, the asset restriction orders began taking effect. Accounts covered by the court orders at 4 banks were frozen within 11 minutes. Certain operating accounts were placed under controlled administration to pay wages, maintain facility safety, and satisfy essential obligations. 7 accounts associated with shell entities were frozen overnight. 3 accounts in Cyprus were placed under temporary preservation orders by partner authorities 2 days later. Formal mutual legal assistance procedures continued afterward. At 9:15 p.m., teams that had been present at the Crystal City headquarters since the previous week began executing supplemental orders, covering executive devices and the company's financial systems. Critical devices were seized. The server environment was preserved intact for continued forensic imaging under government control. No one had time to alter the data. The systems had been remotely isolated at 6 p.m., the same time the company's access to defense networks was suspended. At 10 p.m., 11 active Cole Aeronautics government contracts were placed under emergency review. Non-essential work stopped. 2 component supply contracts supporting active units continued under government supervision until they were transferred to other suppliers 3 weeks later, without disruption. The market opened Friday morning. Cole Aeronautics shares fell 42% in the first 14 minutes. Trading in the stock was halted twice for extreme volatility. By the closing bell, the company had lost $1,100,000,000 in market capitalization. At dinner, Ryan had said the company's value would rise by at least 40% the morning after the ceremony. He had only been wrong about the direction. It took another 19 days for the network behind Helix Meridian to begin emerging. The 11 allocation instructions Helix sent led investigators to 23 accounts and 4 people who had not appeared in the original file. 2 of those 4 did not work directly for Helix Meridian. They worked for the entity behind it. 3 partner agencies received the portions of the file concerning infrastructure, accounts, and entities within their jurisdiction. The Singapore office closed on day 22. Partner authorities isolated the related authentication infrastructure before it could connect to any operational military system. The remote recovery module was never activated on a real system. It never entered an operational military network. The fastest part was not the legal process. It was the human one. Within 48 hours, 19 people who had appeared in photographs with my father issued statements or responded to the press. The language was so similar the statements could have been stacked on top of one another. The relationship was purely social. They had not been in contact for years, and they fully supported the investigation. 2 lobbying firms terminated their contracts with Cole Aeronautics on the same morning. After part of the court record became public, the press reported that investigators had recovered a spreadsheet documenting benefits and recipients. Of the 291 rows, 34 people had completed in column E. By the end of the second week, 17 of them had voluntarily contacted the Department of Justice through counsel. No one reached out because of remorse. They understood that the extent and timing of cooperation could affect how prosecutors evaluated each person's role. My father once told me at dinner that everything in this city crossed someone's table and that our family had sat at all of them. He was right. He simply had not accounted for the fact that the people seated with him were there for their own interests. And interests change direction faster than friendship. One more entry appeared in that week's summary. At the very end, in 2 sentences. Cedar Ridge Farm in Howard County, Maryland, did not appear on any list of assets frozen, restricted from transfer, or subject to forfeiture. It appeared in the case file, but it had never been mortgaged, transferred, or placed into an effective loan, because I had never signed. 11 months after the arrests, Thomas and Ryan were convicted. Vanessa had previously pleaded guilty under a cooperation agreement. The sentencing hearings were held separately in September. I did not sit through the trials. As a witness, I remained outside the courtroom until I was called. I testified twice, for a total of 6 hours. Once, I answered questions about Aegis Hawk, the review process, and the technical test results. The second time, I authenticated the dinner recording, described what I had personally witnessed, and explained how the initial evidence was transferred to the independent investigative team. Thomas Cole, he pleaded not guilty. His attorneys took the only position available to them. He was a senior executive who did not know the technical details, did not write code, did not operate the accounts, and did not fully understand the module's function. That argument did not free him from responsibility for the bribery network and contract fraud. Prosecutors introduced his 74 handwritten signatures on consulting expenditure approvals spanning 11 years. They played the recording from the dining room, which ran longer than half an hour, and captured him explaining that the loan would be repaid with federal contract funds while pressuring me to pledge Cedar Ridge as collateral. 9 former subordinates testified for the prosecution. They described a system in which Thomas approved money, selected the people to approach, and instructed subordinates to provide what the other person wanted before that person had to ask. He was convicted for leading the bribery network, federal procurement fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He received 24 years in federal prison. Ryan Cole. He received the longest sentence of the 3 defendants, and he received it because of the thing in which he had placed the most confidence. He had written everything down: the entity structures, payment flows, contracts, invoices, correspondence with Helix Meridian, and the CA 20190114 folder. Ryan preserved every version because he believed records managed by the legal department would never be examined by anyone outside the company. He kept them because he believed no one would ever read them. The defense tried to exclude the recording by arguing that I was a federal official acting as a government agent at a private dinner. The court rejected the argument. I was a direct participant in the conversation. The recording occurred before I received any direction from investigators, and no government personnel had directed my actions at the dinner table. The defense also challenged the 4 images I captured from the hallway. The court found that they were recorded from a place where I was lawfully present and were used only as preliminary leads supporting independent search warrant applications. Ryan's law license was suspended 3 weeks after his arrest and permanently revoked after his conviction. He was convicted of designing the unlawful financial system, contract fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, conspiring to transfer unauthorized access to defense technology to a foreign entity, and fabricating evidence to accuse a federal official. 41 years. In the sentencing record, the judge identified one aggravating factor separately. The defendant had spent 14 months preparing to shift criminal responsibility onto a person he knew was innocent. Vanessa Cole. The morning after the arrests, through counsel, she offered to cooperate. Her testimony had value because she was the named owner of 2 entities and had signed genuine documents. But her testimony did not erase her responsibility for the accounts, records, and property in her name. Prosecutors did not contend that Vanessa understood the technical operation of the module. They proved that she knew the companies had no real business operations, signed documents at Ryan's direction, and benefited from the money moving through them. Her ownership interests and the assets of both entities registered in her name were made subject to forfeiture. The payment for the Colorado house was recovered before the transaction closed. Cars, jewelry, and 3 personal accounts were traced to criminal proceeds. She received 28 months in federal prison. She filed for divorce before Ryan's trial concluded. Within 4 days of Thursday night, her access to the corporate aircraft, the Colorado house transaction, and the political invitations had all disappeared. Diane Cole? She was not criminally charged. Prosecutors considered the question for 2 months. They ultimately concluded that she knew enough to choose not to ask, but not enough to establish complicity. She lost most of her assets through forfeiture and civil restitution proceedings because many jointly held assets were connected to unlawful funds. She retained the portion that could not be traced to criminal activity. The Georgetown house was sold at auction in April. She moved to an apartment in Silver Spring. Washington society does not require a formal decision to exclude someone. No one crossed her name off a list. People simply stopped sending invitations, and she had to realize it on her own. There is something I need to make clear here because it matters. I did not personally take anything from them. I did not sign the arrest warrants. I did not impose the sentences. I did not decide which assets would be seized. I had even recused myself from signing the final technical assessment. All I did was refuse to sign one document, record a conversation in which I was present, transfer what I saw to an independent investigative team, and present a determination signed by someone else. The rest came from their own records, created by them, preserved by them for 11 years, and no one had forced them to do any of it. My mother called in November. She did not call any of my personal numbers. She called my office, identified herself as Director Cole's mother, and my secretary relayed the message. I agreed to meet her at Cedar Ridge. I chose the location deliberately. I did not live there full-time, so I did not have to bring her into my home in Northern Virginia. Cedar Ridge also gave me enough distance to end the meeting when necessary. She arrived by taxi at 10 on Saturday morning. She wore the blue wool coat she had owned for 15 years. She used to call it her coat for going out to the country. We sat on the back porch. It was November. The white fence followed the eastern hillside, and the grass had turned yellow. This was where my grandfather used to sit. Since Ryan was transferred to the federal facility, I have only spoken to your brother a few times, she said as soon as she sat down. The mail is very slow, the calls are short and irregular. I poured her tea. She did not drink it. Ryan's voice is different. He does not say anything, but I can hear that he is not doing well. I said nothing. 41 years, Megan. Do you understand what that means? Ryan could die in there. Your father could too, 24 years, and he is already 67. I understand what the numbers mean. She placed her hand on the table. Write a letter. I looked at her. Their attorneys are appealing. Write that this was an internal family misunderstanding and that your father and Ryan never intended to hurt you. Say that if they later ask for a reduced sentence or clemency, you do not object, she continued, speaking faster. And you still have your position. You can speak to the people who decide these things. You do not have to do anything publicly. One phone call is enough. Someone in your position can make one call and get results. I know that. I let her finish. You are asking me to use my office to bend a federal process for the benefit of my family, I said. That kind of choice is exactly what brought them here. I am not. The sentences have been imposed. I cannot withdraw the case, and I will not write something false to influence an appeal or any request for clemency. I am only asking you to help your father and your brother. If I used my office or made a false statement to influence the case, I would violate my public duties, potentially obstruct justice, and place myself under investigation. You are always like this, her voice changed. Everything becomes law with you. This is your family, Megan. Have you asked me a single question? She looked at me. In the final hours before the ceremony, you called me 4 times. The one time I answered, you said you had not asked Dad or Ryan what they needed my signature for. You only told me to come back and sign. I truly did not know. I know, I believe you. I kept my voice even, but you chose not to know. For 11 years you sat at the same table and chose not to ask, because asking would have required you to do something. She was silent. And today, you are sitting here. You have talked about 41 years, Ryan's voice, the house, and the fact that you had to take a taxi. I looked at her. You have not said one word about what they intended to do to me. You are fine, she said. That was the most honest answer she gave all morning. Until then, part of me had still thought she might have come to ask whether I was all right. That thought left me on the porch more lightly than I expected. They had 3 opportunities to stop, I said, when I refused to sign, when I called the money a bribe, and when they still had time to stop the transfer before the announcement, because they thought you could not do anything. Yes, I said. Exactly. She picked up her purse. At the steps, she turned back. Do you no longer consider us family? Family does not ask one person to sacrifice her freedom to conceal everyone else's crimes. The taxi was waiting outside the gate. I remained on the porch until it disappeared around the curve, then went inside. March, 6 months after sentencing. Cedar Ridge, in early spring, has a color I cannot describe to anyone who has never stood there at 7 in the morning. The new grass has emerged but is not fully green. Dew still rests on the top rails of the white fence. The gravel road from the gate to the main house is 400 yards long, and my grandfather walked it every morning for 37 years. Ownership of this land had not changed. That was what I thought about most during those 6 months. Not the sentences, not the trials. The fact that Cedar Ridge remained intact exactly as he had left it while everything else collapsed. If I had signed that night, this land would have been tied to a loan that was not mine and could have remained trapped in enforcement proceedings for years. The East Stable had been renovated since January. I opened a program there in partnership with 2 veterans support organizations. Each month, groups of former service members and their families came for equine-assisted activities or simply for a few quiet hours in a place where no one required them to tell their stories. I did not put my name on the program. It bore my grandfather's name. That Saturday morning, a group was gathering in the back field. General Hale arrived at 9, driving himself and wearing civilian clothes. I had never seen him without his uniform and general officer insignia. He looked less distant. We walked along the eastern fence. All requests to stay the sentences have been denied, he said. The sentences remain in effect while the appeals continue. I know. There are 2 things you do not know. He stopped where the fence turned down the slope. The Aegis Hawk program was recompeted after the architecture and security requirements were rebuilt. The new contractor is in Ohio and is 1/3 the size of Cole Aeronautics. Did they pass? After 3 rounds of revisions, the final build completed independent review in February. Every component was declared and traceable. And the second thing, the first deployment begins in June. 14 units will transition in phases over 18 months. I looked down the hillside. Throughout the investigation and the trials, I had read thousands of pages about my family's case. Not one line had made me feel lighter. What he had just said did. "There is one more thing," he said. "General Hale just said there were two. The department is considering you for Deputy Assistant Secretary for Supply Chain Security. The formal process will begin next month. I will think about it." "You will decline." "I will think about it," I said. He laughed. He left at 10:30. I returned to the main house, crossed the living room, and stopped in front of the bookcase by the window. The framed photograph was there. It had been taken in the fall when I was 22. The white fence was behind us. My grandfather had one hand on the old mare's neck. I stood to his right. I did not feel that I had defeated anyone. I need to say that accurately, because anything else would be a lie. My father would grow old in federal prison. Ryan might spend most of the rest of his life there. That did not make me happy. I did not think about it every day. But on the days I did, it still did not make me happy. What I had gained was not victory. What I had gained was that Saturday morning. It was standing in my own house at 36, with no one left who had the power to define me as their failed daughter. For 11 years I had lived inside a definition written by other people. I had left it there because I kept hoping they would revise it one day. They did not. They never intended to. And the day I stopped waiting for them to revise it was the day I became free. Not the day they were arrested. Not the day they were sentenced. The day I stopped needing their approval. I went into the back field at 11. A group of people stood around the east stable. None of them needed to know my title. At Cedar Ridge, what mattered was not what kind of document I was authorized to sign, which table I sat at, or what title a general used when he addressed me. What mattered was that the land was still here. The stable doors were open, and the people who needed a quiet place had found their way to it. I did not bring down the coal empire. It collapsed because of the greed of the people running it, the arrogance that convinced them no one could stop them, and the opportunities to turn back that they chose to ignore. Blood is not a license to escape responsibility. Family is where people protect one another, not where one person is asked to sacrifice her decency, career, and freedom to preserve everyone else's reputation. I stepped down from the porch and walked toward the stable. Behind me, the house remained standing. Ahead, a new day had begun. Do you think Megan made the right choice? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.